Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Tuesday morning by Andrew Erickson and by Chris Welsh. Fellows, we are diving into the wide receivers here. Some guys to buy, some guys to sell. You can buy high, buy low, sell high, sell low. You know how the show goes. At this point, it's wide receiver trade show. Welsh, what wide receiver are you buying right now?
Atlanta Falcons, Darnell Mooney. Whether it is buying at a high, buying at a median value, I want to buy Darnell Mooney. That's what I am into right now. This past week, week 9, number 1 in first read percentage, according to Fantasy Points. 52%, a wild first read percentage. And we had Drake London in that game for a decent period of time, where he is one of the top 10. I believe he's like 9th or 10th on the season in overall first read percentage. But while Drake London has dominated in that, on the season, Mooney is also inside the top 25 of first read percentage at around 29%. He's actually got within 0.01 of Nico Collins' first read percentage. Why do I care about that? Because it's first looks. It's first looks in this passing offense. He's had 5 or more targets in every single game but one. He has had 8 targets or more in 3 of the last 5 games. On top of it all, in the Andrew Erickson playbook of schedules, 3rd best schedule for wide receivers to end out the season. And Drake London with this hip pointer thing, we don't know if there's going to be missed time. Darnell Mooney has just been a fantasy gem it's just an easy, underplayed fantasy gem in this passing offense. We would have thought the number 2 read in the Atlanta Falcons offense coming into this year was going to be Kyle Pitts. It's incorrect. It's Darnell Mooney. And if London is to miss time, Mooney will 100% just jump into that role because he's already one of those just high first read guys. So he can stretch the field deep. He's getting those first looks, get him into the red zone looks. That's been a heavy thing that Drake London has had. I just think all signs are pointing, and I'm just not sure that the cost is going to cost of a top 24 wide receiver. So by that, I really think Darnell Mooney has a chance to just continue running on as a top 24 wideout. So I want to go and buy Darnell Mooney for rest of season.
To that point, Welsh, he's not in the top 24 in ECR, in half PPR amongst wide receivers. He's wide receiver 29 rest of season. That might go up a little bit during this week as people, kind of further react to the Drake London injury. But Erickson, I'm curious, do you think that the London injury is a good thing for Mooney in that he'll get more targets, or is it a bad thing in that he'll now get more of defensive attention, from top cornerbacks going up against the Falcons?
I mean, I don't really think so. I think it's just volume. I think it's a volume play here. Drake London operates at a different part of the field. Again, if the offense is worse, then it's not good for Mooney, but where does Mooney score his touchdowns? From all over the field, from their own 20-yard line, because he generates big plays. So I wouldn't be concerned about Mooney. I think that you just want volume, and I think that Mooney's going to deliver, and he's a guy that has a 1,000-yard season on his resume. Drake London doesn't. As crazy as that sounds to say, but like Mooney was, again, I was wrong about London. I wasn't high enough on him in draft season, but I loved Mooney as a wide receiver 69 ADP. Terrell Furman doesn't ever let me forget.
I was just going to say, we have to shout out Terrell because he was all over Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, and he always tags me anytime Mooney does something good on Sunday. Yeah. He's like, wide receiver 69 ADP. I'm like, you know it, brother. So, yeah, I think this is a great play going after Darnell Mooney because I think probably wide receiver 29. I mean, based on his receiving yard, he's top 20 in receiving yards per game this year, the entire season. So I know it's inflated by a couple big games against the Bucs, but still, like, he's producing. And I don't see a reason why he won't produce. Favorable schedule, London banged up. Good job, Welsh.
Yeah, he's another guy, if you look at kind of the finishes week to week, and I don't think you said this already, Erickson, but he has 1 wide receiver 2 finish on the season. He has 1 wide receiver 3 finish on the season, which, by the way, is the very back end of wide receiver 3. He was wide receiver 36. Everything else is he's either outside the top 36 or he's inside the top 10 so far this season. So now 2 of those inside the top 10 were in the last 2 weeks. So now we get even more volume for him. I do agree with the call as well. I wanted to kind of pose the question on Drake London, but ultimately I agree. Like, this is somebody that I want to be investing in. And again, I said already, the cost, like wide receiver 29, that's too low for him.
Agreed.
So I'd be really happy to go after a guy like Mooney. Seems like a strong buy. You can use the trade analyzer at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the MyPlaybook app to instantly evaluate how any trade will affect your team for this week, the rest of the season, or even in Dynasty. I'm sure the trade analyzer will tell you that trading for Darnell Mooney is a smart call. Erickson, what wide receiver are you buying?
I am going for the post-hype sleeper, Josh Downs, who did not deliver as the Colts offense did not deliver entirely with Joe Flacco on Sunday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings. So shout out to Pat Fitzmaurice for not being part of the Downs. Let's pump him up as high as we can in the rankings. So that's why Fitz ranks higher than me in the rankings competition. But that doesn't mean I'm out on Josh Downs rest of the season, because despite a pretty lackluster performance, still hyper targeted. 33% target share, 45% target rate per route run. I don't think Michael Pittman is healthy. This guy has 2 catches in the last 2 games, despite seeing 10 targets. I think that he's banged up. I don't know when he's going to be healthy, and that means Josh Downs is just going to continue to see targets because, you know, who's the quarterback rest of season? Joe Flacco. That's going to be the guy. So I'm just chasing volume here with Josh Downs. Again, the Vikings was a tough matchup. Again, on paper, the Vikings are a team that's given up a lot of points to receivers, but it's because teams have trailed and have gotten a lot of points in garbage time. I mean, half of those numbers are probably from that one Packers game where Jordan Love was throwing it all across the yard in the second half. So again, it's a good defense, and they're not going to play the Vikings defense every single week. So I don't love the Colts schedule rest of season. I can't believe I've become the schedule guys, the schedule guy to you people. So I don't love that necessarily, but I'm going to keep bringing it to the table. I guess I might as well embrace it. So don't love the schedule rest of season, but I think the volume is there for Downs with Pittman banged up and with Flacco at quarterback. So after he was really hyped up last week, didn't deliver, I think people are going to be, I was wrong about Downs. I think this is an opportunity to buy.
I think that the schedule is a good thing to mention for him specifically, though, because, like, for example, this past week, I was not all in, but I liked Downs this week. The reason that Fitz's kind of argument against him worked for me is that this is not a good matchup for Joe Flacco facing this pass rush in Minnesota. So I think looking at the defense when you have a quarterback who is limited, and by the way, whether it's Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco, these are limited, options for the Colts right now. It will impact how Josh Downs' numbers look on a week-to-week basis. I still definitely obviously prefer him with Flacco, but if he goes up against a team that has a ferocious pass rush, I'm probably going to be a lot more hesitant to be interested in really anybody, any of the pass catchers in this offense. So I think it's a legitimate thing to keep an eye on. Welsh, what are you doing with Downs?
Yeah, I actually almost picked this one as well, just because like the pass rush is actually a super important thing, because that offensive line, I couldn't believe it when I didn't watch the entirety of the game, but like towards the end, I'm like, check in to see how Josh Downs is doing. Every single play, every single rusher was in Joe Flacco's face, and he clearly is not going to be able to get off a good ball. The positive, though, is when he did and when he can, it does go to Josh Downs. He is the safety net. So, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of victory lapping about like, we're going to bench Anthony Richardson for Flacco. How about me now? And it's like, okay, well, I still don't really think that argument plays, because, that same energy over to the bad weeks of Anthony Richardson. All of this just still comes back to Josh Downs. Pittman with the struggle. Josh Downs still got whatever their version of a higher volume was. And we do know in general, if you're not going up against, like well said, a ferocious pass rush, they're going to have a little bit more time, and you're going to see probably double-digit targets for Josh Downs. So it's a post-hype trade that I think makes a ton of sense. You're probably going to get some value on it with people being like, hands up, oh, the Colts stink, everything is a disaster. I think this is actually like a really sharp play, #2sharp for Erickson.
Well, so let's go to the guys we're selling. What wide receiver do you want to sell right now?
So I'm going to sell this guy off of a big week, and I don't think I feel like Erickson's going to push back on me against this one. I'm going to go with Jayden Reed with the Green Bay Packers. And, when you look at the game log, obviously the weeks with Malik Willis, he completely fell apart. You get Jordan Love back, 5 catches, 113 yards, like big plays. That's fantastic. Though one of the things I'll point out about this game, even though Love was back, he ended up having like I think it was 18% first read percentage, which is bad. 21% on the year. So as far as like what first looks are going to, they really haven't been going to Jayden Reed. And that kind of leads to, he has ate so much this season on really big plays. So I don't want to discount that to say like he's not going to continue making big plays. Here's what hurts the big plays. Shall we do it again, friends? Yes, strength of schedule. 5th worst of all wide receivers, to end out the season as far as strength of schedule goes. So you got tougher matchups, tougher to make big plays. Some of those big games he had, 138 yards in game 1. He had a 70-yard play. 139 yards in week 4, had a 42-yard play. 78 yards in week 5, had a 53-yard play. And this past week, 41. So these big plays are, obviously a big portion of his offense. Yet in all of that, he has 3 touchdowns. He is not being involved in the rushing side. They've got 4 wide receivers that they keep using. They've got Tucker Kraft, and you have a quarterback whose health is in question for the rest of the season. If he were a higher volume play, I would feel better. He's not. He is a big play guy that obviously is explosive. But I think this is an opportunity to move off of what might be some big ups and downs. We've talked about this with other wideouts. I guess it's not fair to say the last 3 weeks, but just to go with it, 81, 56, and 17 are his finishes. Obviously, 2 of those were with Malik. But he has had 3 top 24 wide receiver finishes with Love, but also outside of the 40. So there's boom and bust. There's a tough schedule. There's a really good performance off of this week to sell. I throw this out. I know it's a no, Erickson, but how close are Darnell Mooney and Jayden Reed rest of season to each other?
Not close.
Not even. See, and I disagree. I actually think rest of season, I think Darnell Mooney and Jayden Reed are in the same wide receiver pack rest of season. Between wide receiver 20, let's call it 20 and 25.
They're 17 and 29 in ECR for the record.
Rest of season.
Yeah, rest of season. Erickson, are you surprised that Jayden Reed doesn't have more than 11 rushing attempts through 9 games, especially considering the quarterback situation has been, largely a not fully healthy Jordan Love?
I mean, that seems like a decent amount. I mean,
it's like 1 a game. Yeah. I was kind of expecting maybe 2 or people kind of make the comparison as like a poor man's Deebo Samuel. I wasn't expecting like several a game, but I was expecting like maybe 2 or 3 every game. Most games he's had 1.
He has, by the way, 3 over the last 4 games. And when Jordan Love was gone, they went away from that. They didn't even really try to that's actually like that 49er playbook would be, when their running backs are down or there's a stunt in the offense, Deebo gets a higher percentage of carries. And that didn't happen with Jayden Reed.
2/3 of his rushing yards on the season came in weeks 1 and 2. Like it just hasn't been that explosive or high volume in that side of his game from week 3 and beyond. So I don't know. I thought it was a little lower than I expected.
I mean, what is it compared to other receivers? Like how many more receivers have more rushing attempts than Reed does? I don't know what the number is. So I guess for me, I'm not, that's not something I'm really concerned about. Why is he not getting enough rushing attempts? I just think that he's a really good player. And when I look at matchups, week 14 at the Lions, he can be a top 5 receiver in that matchup. Week 15 at the Seahawks, top 5 wide receiver. Week 16 against the Saints. I just think that I think that your point about the big plays, I think that's something we should have that conversation about next year when we're drafting Jayden Reed as a potential like 2nd round pick. Maybe that's a reason to fade him kind of after the big Deebo Samuel year where he had just unsustainable production. But for this year, Reed is their best player on offense. So I'm not going to overthink it.
You would just love that best player in offense to get more than 5 touches per game.
Maybe if he didn't score on all his plays, he'd get more targets.
He has 3 touchdowns. He has 3 touchdowns. What are you talking about? Well, 4.
Yeah, he's doing it on 3 yet. Yeah. And he's doing it on, he hasn't even scored that many touchdowns compared to the amount of yardage he has put up. I mean, when you look at just total yards from scrimmage, I believe that he's inside the top 3 among all wide receivers. Like he's right up there, or at least top 3 or top 5. So Jayden Reed was my buy last week. So I'm not going to just turn around and sell him after he had a big game in the pouring rain with a quarterback with an injured groin. And I'm watching him make plays after plays. And I'm like, this guy's just so good. So that's, again, I don't think that your logic is wrong, Welsh, selling off the big plays, but I just want to ride the wave with Jayden Reed. I think that he's been this good. And I think that this is a good conversation to revisit though in draft season, depending on where Jayden Reed ends up, where he does an ADP, because I think that he might be overvalued.
Erickson's like Alicia Silverstone in Clueless. Rolling with the homies. Anyone get that
I
reference?
looked it up. I've seen Clueless.
Okay.
Erickson, have you seen Clueless?
Yeah, I'm clueless.
You are clueless.
I'm too
Clueless.
old.
It's a good movie. It's a kind of a class. It's very 90s. It's very of its time.
Yeah.
I did pull it up, by the way. So Jayden Reed, that 11 rushing attempts. It is the second most for any wide receiver this season. Debo has more than twice as
I
many.
think our expectation, like what you were going to
I mean, he's not Debo. He's a very like Debo gets like running back carries. Like
sure,
Jayden
and
Reed
I'm not saying he is Debo. I'm just saying, particularly because Jordan Love has been so limited, I expected them to use Reed a bit more in this way. And again, he hasn't had even multiple carries in a game since week 5. So like it's been trending in the wrong direction in terms of that volume. So I'm not saying he should have as many as Debo. And again, second most in the NFL amongst wide receivers. Like that's a very legitimate counter by you. I just thought it was going to be a little bit more. Again, I thought it was going to be like 2 or 3 a game when Love is hurt, not 0 or 1 a game.
You also have one other concern is you have to worry if Romeo Doubs starts crying again and takes his ball and goes home, then like the team might have to give him more touches. And that's a concern that takes away from Jayden Reed when Romeo Doubs gets upset.
Yeah, it's a good point. Erickson, what wide receiver are you selling? And spoiler alert, it's somebody you've listed here before.
No, somebody I listed last week.
Recently last week, yes.
Jaxon Smith-Njigba. So again, obviously, massive game last week. So did not feel great about the take last week, but sometimes this happens where
never wrong, just early.
You're a week too early, right? I was a week too early saying that this is the end of JSN. You got to sell him. So that's an L on my part, but I'm going to trust the process here because you have a player coming off a career game, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. This is the process. You want to sell receivers off peak performances. Let's go back to week 2. Who had a massive game against the Rams? Marvin Harrison Jr. If you had probably sold high at that point, you probably would have been happy with the result and the return that you got on him. So for JSN, I'm just looking at the specific matchup, what he did against the Los Angeles Rams, and DK Metcalf and Noah Fant were both inactive. I did think that DK Metcalf was going to come back when I was talking about JSN as a sell. Again, I'm not trying to say that I was right. I was wrong about selling him last week, but DK Metcalf is going to come back after the bye week because Seattle is on a bye week this week. And when you look at what JSN and how he scored all his points essentially against the Los Angeles Rams, it was all downfield targets as a deep threat, which he has not been used at whatsoever this season. His average depth of target was over 20 yards. He hasn't had a game this year besides last week against the Rams where his average depth of target was more than 11 yards. So without DK Metcalf, he filled that void against a beatable Rams defense that's bad against the deep ball. I just don't think that's his role every single week. I think that he's a guy that needs volume usually. He doesn't usually win with efficiency, winning downfield. So for those reasons, I just think that this is an unsustainable type of boom game from JSN. Again, listen back to last week. I never said JSN was like a bad player. I just thought that maybe we hadn't seen the ceiling. Clearly I was wrong because we saw the ceiling game against the Rams, but we've seen ceiling games against the Rams from a lot of receivers. Jameson Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And a lot of these guys have been up and down after those blow-up games against the Los Angeles Rams. So given that, I don't think that the schedule is great for Seattle rest of season. They're on a bye week this week. Number 32nd ranked quarterback schedule. I think that you'll never get more than you can for JSN right now. And I just feel so bad that I listed him as a sell last week because I would have felt so much more confident about selling him this week because you could have got so much more. So I apologize if you sold him already, but I still think it's the right move, the sharp move to make by selling high on JSN.
You don't think the cat's like kind of out of the bag with him? Like, I mean, he's only 22, his second year receiver. Like this is sometimes it doesn't happen in the back half of, season 1. It takes till season 2 for these young receivers to break out. You don't think this is like, the Seahawks are going to look at this and say, he could have had over 200 yards if it wasn't for the plays called back due to the penalties. I mean, he was so utterly dominant in this game that it's hard for me to think that the Seahawks are going to look at this and say, yeah, we're fine, like getting away from him again.
Do you think that he'll take over as the number 1 deep threat in this offense? If you do, then keep him. But I don't think that's the case because Metcalf wasn't playing. That's always been Metcalf's role as the air yards guy in this offense. So that's my concern that his role is going to go back to primary underneath target.
Where do you think he's gonna wind? So right now he's wide receiver 35 in rest of season rankings. And again, sometimes those like update throughout the week coming off of a big performance on a Sunday. It is only Tuesday morning still. Where do you think he winds up? And like, what do you think is the right range for him? Because to me, I think wide receiver 35 is currently too low.
Right, because he's coming off a big game. But where was he last week? Wide receiver 34.
But I would
35.
expect moving forward, I think he will be a better than wide receiver 35.
Do you think that he should be ranked the rest of the season ahead of Khalil Shakir?
They're like 2 apart in ECR, by the way. Shakir is 2 spots behind him right now. It goes JSN, Lad McConkey, Khalil Shakir, and that would be a really interesting buy,
Right, a bunch of slot receivers, and it's like who just had the big game, right?
Impromptu buy, sell, or hold trio: JSN, Lad McConkey, Khalil Shakir, Erickson.
Oh man. I mean, I'm probably going to hold Shakir. I mean, JSN is the guy you get the most for. Just like then 2 weeks ago, McConkey was the guy you get the most for because he had 2 touchdowns. So
let me reframe it then. Who's the type of name you would want to sell him for? What would be a big enough return that you're excited about a return?
I'd rather have Darnell Mooney. There,
okay.
Darnell Mooney. Who was I talking about before? Oh, Jayden Reed. Boom.
Well, yeah.
Welsh, what do you think about JSN?
Yeah, the masochist in me wants Jayden Reed to go for 220 yards this week so we can put him back on the list. I want to keep doing that. I'm on both sides of this. Like, I kind of agree. Like, when DK Metcalf comes back, he's the big deep threat option. He's the number 1 wide receiver. But there's a little part of me that is like, I don't think that can destroy the value of JSN. I think them getting to use him in those higher roles over these last couple of weeks, it's a good thing. And it's something that offense and Geno might feel more comfortable with, and he gets more of a target share. He was already being the guy that would go over Tyler Lockett. But then you get 3 guys in the offense. I think a sharp play is just like, if you can trade JSN high, do it. I don't think I'm as like, you got to get out from JSN maybe as Erickson, or maybe it's just coming off that way. I think like what that trio you had, I think I might have bought Lad, held JSN, and sold Khalil Shakir. Shakir's been going, but you also have, Coleman. You've got Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper wasn't active. Coleman got hurt. Like, there's a lot of guys in that offense as well. The only difference is like the Seahawks are one of the highest passing teams in the NFL. So that leaves more potential volume for JSN. Unfortunately, like, for him to be massively impactful, he does need like 10 targets a game. So I'm not as like get out from, but I think it's hard to deny if someone saw this performance, sees, young wide receiver in this big pass heavy offense and is willing to sell, like you said, in I would take Darnell Mooney as well. I think there is a good opportunity that like he has peaked and it's only going to kind of come down for the rest of the year.
All right, Erickson's got to get rolling here, so we'll speed through our buy, sell, or hold receiver edition. Marvin Harrison Jr., DJ Moore, Zay Flowers. Again, Erickson, that's Harrison, Moore, and Flowers. Who are you buying? Who are you selling? Who are you holding?
Buying Marvin Harrison Jr. for the playoff schedule. That's very, very good. I'm going to hold Zay Flowers because he's on the Ravens and they just score some more points than any other team. And I just don't want Bears. So I'm going to sell DJ Moore. I just don't want Bears.
Welsh, what do you think? And by the way, the reason I included Flowers, because I know he's been really good, is just the thought that, another weekend, Diontae Johnson might get used some more. So, I don't know if there's any concern there or not. That's why I wanted to throw him in there. I
mentally do this like a tiny bit different than Erickson, because I think Erickson looks at it like, hey, Flowers just had the big game, or, like in that type of range. Like, Flowers is a guy I just want rest of season, or that, Harrison was the best value. I buy that Flowers is the guy of this list. I think the hold is Marvin Harrison, and I agree. DJ Moore is the guy I'm off of. If you guys see in the trade deadline pass, we're doing this right before, and he got traded somewhere, maybe that would get me a little bit more excited. Those rumors of like the Steelers and stuff. But I think Flowers is the clear-cut trust guy here. Marvin Harrison is the epitome of boomer bust, and DJ Moore is just, unfortunately, been bust.
One other trio here, Diontae Johnson, who I just mentioned, Calvin Ridley, and the aforementioned Khalil Shakir. Welsh, we'll start with you on this one. Diontae Johnson, Calvin Ridley, Khalil Shakir.
I think I would buy Calvin Ridley with Mason Rudolph making this offense so much better, but at least he's like, they're able to throw the ball and get volume. I would hold on Khalil Shakir, even though I was selling him in that other instance. I just don't have interest in Diontae Johnson. I think it's an awful destination. Maybe he has like one really cool game, but offense that doesn't pass at heavy volume that already has Zay Flowers, who I bought. They've got a couple tight ends. Bateman has been good. No thanks. I'm a big old sell on Diontae.
Erickson?
I'm going to hold Diontae because I think that this is not the time to sell after he basically didn't play. Again, we saw DeAndre Hopkins have a monster game after really not doing that much in his first game. So I think that you're selling too low on Diontae. I think you should at least give it another week, especially against the Bengals this week. So I'm going to hold Diontae, buy Khalil Shakir, who's been just this uber efficient number 1 receiver for the Bills. Cooper and Coleman are both banged up. So we don't know what those injuries are going to end up being, but Shakir has been Josh Allen's guy. And to your point about the Seahawks throwing a lot, since the bye week, Buffalo Bills up in pass rate over expectation. They are throwing a lot more than they were, or excuse me, not before the bye week, but the last couple of weeks since they acquired Amari Cooper. Essentially, they've been throwing a lot more. So I'm optimistic about this Bills passing game rest of the season. So I want to buy Shakir and I guess Calvin Ridley. I don't think he's a must sell because they have a good schedule, but there's always a chance that they decide to just go back to Will Levis, and that could be horrible. So yeah.
We'll wrap up on that. Don't forget about our weekly trade live stream on our YouTube channel where you can come and ask your specific trade questions. We'll be with you every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. For those listening on the podcast, just go to youtube.com/fantasypros, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified of all of our weekly live streams. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Best of luck in your trades this week in week 10. For Erickson and Welsh, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see you again next time.